Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 4th of October 2021. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, I put out this tweet a few hours ago, just thinking about kind of like Ethereum, where Ethereum is today. I was writing the Daily Gwei newsletter, and I was kind of thinking about it, and I was like, it's kind of like the golden age of Ethereum right now, like the golden era. I haven't felt this excited about Ethereum, not so necessarily kind of like the price and like the price action going forward, but like the actual ecosystem. I haven't felt this excited about it pretty much ever. Like, in terms of how much activity is happening, how many new kind of like innovations we're seeing, how many people we're onboarding, I've been going on about this a lot on the Refuel, of course, for a while now, but it's unmatched, right? It really hasn't happened like this at any other time in history. So I put out this tweet where I basically said, we have EIP 1559 burning ETH. That's obviously a huge deal. Like, I know it's funny because like no one really talks about it anymore unless we get to those milestones like 400,000 ETH burned, and then when we get to 500,000, we're at like 427,000 at time of recording of ETH burned. But the funny thing is that like that's still there. That's still happening in perpetuity. We're still burning a lot of ETH all the time, and that is kind of got flowing to ETH holders. Now I know the price hasn't kind of like gone much higher from when 1559 went live. I'm pretty sure it went live when ETH was around 2,900, and ETH is like 3,350 right now. But I think people overestimate the short-term impact of 1559 and underestimate the long-term impact, because that's definitely going to play dividends later on for the price. But more generally, like I really like the fact that it's actually, at least for me, made my transaction experience a lot better, where I've hardly ever had to speed up a transaction since 1559 went live, and it just makes it makes it much smoother for the network in general to process these transactions, and it kind of like has obviously done its job. It's smoothing out the gas fees. So that's really exciting. Then we have like the merge. The progress on the merge is accelerating, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. I have a couple of tweets to talk about with regards to that. But I mean, as I've mentioned before, Altair goes live on the ETH2 kind of like network, the Beacon chain, on October 27th. And then once that happens, all of the attention from the ETH1 and ETH2 devs are going to be on the merge. And it pretty much already is. Like, and as I said, I'll discuss this in a little bit, so I won't spoil that now. And then I went on to say, layer 2 adoption is exploding. And it really is. I mean, I'm going to talk about dYdX in a bit as well, but outside of that, we've seen like last week Immutable teamed up with TikTok, for example. Arbitrum has Reddit going to be deploying using their technology. Optimism is going live with major upgrades this month. Obviously, Arbitrum's live as well. Waiting for more apps to go live on Arbitrum. I think we still need a money market to go live there, like Aave. I think Aave would be the only one. Like Maker and Compound. Maker's not a money market, but like Compound hasn't gone live on any other networks as far as I know at this point, and they also have like an exploit that they're dealing with right now, so probably not going to see that. But once Aave goes live on there, I'm sure we're going to see other apps follow, like Yearn, that kind of like rely on this sort of stuff, and even Alchemix and stuff like that. But still, the rollout is happening, adoption is exploding, and it's not just, I guess, like the layer 2s, it's also the other scalability solutions like sidechains, for example, like the Polygon POS chain is getting a lot of usage. And the fun fact, we all know Axie Infinity has had like an incredible kind of adoption cycle over especially the last, 8 or 9 months. But did you know that Axie originally was on Ethereum layer 1? Obviously, it didn't scale for their needs, so they went and made their own kind of like sidechain called the Ronin sidechain, and that actually uses ETH as part of its economy. So it's using ETH, as far as I know, for kind of like gas fees and things are priced in ETH and stuff like that. Their native token is just for kind of like staking and governance, and for being used within the game itself. So from that perspective, even these side chains are adding a lot of value to ETH and to the Ethereum ecosystem. And I know that the Polygon team is interested in turning their POS chain into a proper kind of like layer 2, or like a true layer 2 later on, or they'll just kind of like migrate users to their generalized layer 2s when they go live. And I know the Axie Infinity team, maybe things have changed because they said this a little while ago, but they're also interested in changing over to one of these kind of like rollups once, or kind of like a Validium or a Volition once they're ready. I could see Axie Infinity going from their sidechain, or at least kind of, I guess, copying the state from their sidechain onto a layer 2, like a Validium or a Volition from Starkware, and just running their stuff on that. That gives them even more scalability than what they have today with their sidechain, and also allows them to have better, I guess, bridgeability, is that a word, or composability with Ethereum's kind of layer 1, and also they inherit some of Ethereum's layer 1 security. For those who don't know, Validium and Volition aren't considered kind of like true L2s because they don't post their data to Ethereum Layer 1. They have like an off-chain data committee. Volition gives you the option whether to post your data on Layer 1 or not. But by trading that off, you get like a lot more scalability for it, much more than even a sidechain can give you. So like an EVM fork sidechain. There are other kind of like sidechains you can do some stuff around and totally centralize it, of course, but like get a bit more juice out of. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff happening on the Layer 2 scalability front there. NFTs. I mean, I don't think any of us saw what was going to happen with NFTs, like as big as it did. Like even the most bullish kind of like people that were even the biggest ETH bulls, NFT bulls that I know didn't expect the adoption to happen this fast, nor did they expect this much money to flow into the NFT space. And it's just onboarded so many people into the Ethereum ecosystem. I know that Ethereum Layer 1 is pricing a lot of people out, and they're seeking refuge on other networks which have cheaper fees, and there are some kind of like NFT ecosystems popping up there. But OpenSea is only on 2 chains as far as I know, Ethereum Layer 1 and Polygon. And that's brought in a lot of people into the Ethereum's kind of like Ethereum ecosystem. A lot of people have been exposed to ETH. They're buying it. They're using it. They're using it for gas fees, which are being burned. You see how kind of like we have this symbiotic relationship going on here. And with these NFT scalability solutions going live, like Immutable X, as I said, they're Immutable teamed up with TikTok. They have like a bunch of other NFT games and platforms kind of building on there. We're going to just onboard even more people to this ecosystem. And then we have DAOs, which are continuing to mature. DAOs have taken this approach where we're kind of just like letting 1,000 of them kind of like come to market, then just kind of like seeing all the experiments play out, innovating, progressing along there, and then seeing kind of like what shakes out and adopting the best kind of like the best ways to run a DAO, manage a DAO, kind of like get people involved with it. And then I ended this tweet by saying, it feels good to be an Etherean right now. It really does. I mean, there's so much happening. It's insane. Like I said in my newsletter today, Ethereum really is a city that never sleeps. I know that the existing web today is like a 24/7 always on kind of thing, but the web is, as it exists today, is different to something like Ethereum, because Ethereum is at its heart a value transfer layer or a settlement layer, for example, where we can transfer value wherever we want. It's an always online financial system, and then you can build whatever you want off of that, like NFTs, DAOs, gaming, all that sort of stuff can be built off of that financial system, and it's literally 24/7, any day of the year, anytime you want. The Ethereum network is there to serve you. It has never had any downtime. It's, there are periods of time where it can get slower, or where the gas fees can spike, so you have to kind of like wait a little bit, but it's always online and ready to serve you, which I think is quite amazing, to be honest. The fact that we have an always online value transfer system, financial system, placed for people to kind of like do stuff with NFTs, with DAOs. It's crazy, because that's what makes this movement kind of global, is the fact that it's always on. Like, could you imagine if for some reason blockchains had like an opening and closing hours like a bank does, for example? It's like, oh yeah, we open at 9 a.m. Eastern time and we close at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So, if you're based in kind of like in Asia or Australia, well, who cares? Like, it's going to be late, or you're sleeping, bad luck. You're out of luck. You can't use the network. You know what I mean? And I guess like that's not the way banks work today. Obviously, there's like local branches and stuff like that. But the fact that, it kind of works like that means that banks are inherently not global institutions. Like, there's different, and they're not kind of like, the systems that they use aren't global settlement systems. There's a bunch of different settlement systems. It's such a crappy system, really, at the end of the day. Whereas Ethereum services the whole world. It does so equally as well. I know when I say that, people are going to be like, oh, well, the gas fees are high. It's not exactly equal to people who can't afford them. But I'm talking about in terms of just like what it produces for people, what it kind of allows people to do. Take away the gas fees for a sec here out of the conversation. You can do anything you want on Ethereum at any time. It's censorship resistant, and no one's kind of like stopping you. There's no opening or closing hours, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, very exciting time to be in Ethereum. I wrote a little bit more about this in the newsletter today if you want to check that out. But yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now. There's a bunch of stuff, other stuff to get through. So yeah, I mentioned the merge. There's currently a merge event happening where a bunch of people have gotten together to basically work on the merge, both the spec and the actual client development. You can see here Jacek, I think that's how you say his name, from, I believe he works on the Nimbus client, kind of like put out this I guess like picture yesterday where he said merge event day one, Nimbus and Nethermind does the merge transition. So I'm assuming this is kind of like the transition from like ETH1 to ETH2, or kind of I guess like from slotting in the execution layer to the consensus layer. And I mean, this has happened a bunch of different times in the past already. We know that this can technically be done, but I think, you know, at this point in time, we're at the, okay, we've got the spec, we know it can technically be done, what can go wrong? That's the stage we're at with the merge right now, because you have to consider all the edge cases, you have to consider all the attack vectors, you have to consider all the kind of like possibilities of bugs, you have to have a plan if something goes wrong as well, I think, and you need to make sure all the clients can kind of like talk to each other, can run this, can stay in consensus for quite a while. As I mentioned, I think on last week's Refuel, they're going to be doing the dev nets soon, and then after the dev nets will come short-lived test nets, and then after that will come long-lived test nets. It's kind of like how we rolled out the beacon chain. I think they're going to probably want to see the long-lived test net kind of, I guess, like exist for a little while before we kind of like see it go to mainnet. But Q1, Q2 next year, I don't expect it to push into Q3. I even think Q2 might be being a bit pessimistic. Like maybe we can get it done by March next year. I just want to see what happens over the next 2 to 3 months, because I know that there are still a few kinks to work out within the merge of, I guess, like the biggest things are kind of, I guess, you know, how miners are going to react. How do we do it so that the miners stay till the very end so we can actually transition across? There are a few ways that they're kind of thinking about. I think they've kind of like settled on having the, I guess, like fork block be based on mining difficulty rather than kind of like a specific block that's set in the set at some point in the future, because then obviously it can be gamed and you want to have it as randomly as possible. So that you kind of reduce those risks as well. But generally, I would say that we know we can do the merge. The specs there. We just need to get all the clients to work well. We need to make sure it's as bug-free as possible. And we need to make sure that there's no, I mean, given that this is an adversarial environment, we need to make sure that any of those kind of like adversaries can't cause any damage during the merge and obviously after it as well. But very, very close. I mean, you know, even if it takes until Q2, that's only 8 months, like till the end of Q2. That's really only 8 or so months from now. So we're very, very close to getting this stuff out there. And of course, once it happens, it'll be like EIP 1559, where it happened, everyone celebrates and was like, oh my God, finally. And then everyone's like, okay, what's next? And of course, what comes after the merge is one of two things. There's statelessness and then there's sharding. Whatever one comes first will be the one that goes into, I guess, into production. Now, I actually will put my money on sharding going first, because as far as I know, all the research for data sharding is already done. It just requires clients to implement this, but they can't do it until the merge is done. So I would say expect sharding before statelessness, but I would say that we might not get that until 2023 at this point. Like maybe end of 2022 for sharding. I mean, it's not that complex to do. It would be awesome to see it go live because the shards will give us a lot more scalability for our layer 2 ecosystem, but expect, you know, the major upgrades that still take, you know, could take up to another 2 years to get all the major upgrades live. And then we have a bunch of other things coming after. But I'm talking about like the three major upgrades from here: the merge, sharding, and statelessness, or kind of like just general statelessness of the Ethereum main chain. Those are the three major things that I'm looking at. And I would expect them to take anywhere from 18 months to 24 months. The merge being the closest here. And maybe we can get sharding end of next year. But we'll have to see how that plays out. All right, so toast.eth had a really good way of, I guess, visualizing the amount of ETH burned, or kind of like thinking about the amount of ETH burned. He said here, the amount of ETH burned since 1559 just 2 months ago would be at number 85 in market cap rank if it was a coin in itself, and it will only keep going up. It was at the time of screenshot almost $1.4 billion worth of kind of, I guess, ETH burned here. And, you know, could you imagine like an ETH, the amount of ETH we burn getting one day to, I mean, like the top 10? It doesn't take much to get into the top 10 of Coingecko these days. Like if I'm just looking at the top 10 now, you would need, what, $28 billion to get into the top 10 here. Obviously, that's going to keep growing over time. So maybe we'll see us in the top 20, which only requires $10 billion. But that's today. But also, if ETH keeps going up in price, that amount of ETH burn goes up in price as well. So it kind of balances itself out there. But I think, we're going to see it, climb the ranks pretty fast, especially as the ETH price goes up. Maybe it's just a bit of a vanity metric, doesn't really mean anything, but still, I guess, a different way of thinking about ETH being burned that I hadn't personally thought about it this way before. All right, Polynya is back with another awesome blog post where he put out this post called Paths Forward for Monolithic Chains. Now, for those of you who have kind of like listened and watched the Refuel lately, you'll know that I've talked about kind of Polynya's work around modular blockchains and monolithic blockchains. Modular being the chains that kind of like separate concerns between data availability, security, and execution. The monolithic chains being the ones that are trying to do everything at layer one. Things like Solana, for example, right? And EOS and stuff like that. So in this post, Polynya basically paints like a rosy, I guess, future for these monolithic chains if they kind of do things like, turn into a roll-up or kind of become like a roll-up and use Ethereum as their security layer, or kind of like expand into a Validium even, or a Volition, or a roll-up, things like that, or become a security and data availability layer. Sort of what like Ethereum with sharding is going to be, or Polygon Veil or Celestia, become a security-only layer, like something very, very similar to Bitcoin, except having the ability to, I guess, verify proofs and maybe even have call data on the chain. But then you're kind of like back to Ethereum, so maybe that's not even something worth doing. But a few good ideas in here. I definitely recommend giving the post a read. It's only a 5-minute read, but I mean, you guys know Polynya is one of my new favorite people over the past few months. Just love all the work that they're putting out, and love all the coverage that they're doing, especially around this, around, I guess, the narratives around monolithic chains versus modular chains and stuff like that. But I fall into this camp as well, where I believe that a lot of these L1s are going to go nowhere. There's a handful of them that actually do have, some level of adoption, organic adoption out there. Even if I think that they're totally kind of like centralized, totally against what I want to see in this ecosystem, there's no denying that some of them have traction right now. And obviously, there's something like Solana, for example, is building out its kind of like own ecosystem there. You have Avalanche as well, seems to be getting some traction. But the funny thing about Avalanche is that all the traction's on their EVM sidechain essentially, so they're really just like kind of like basically Ethereum at this point, but just like on their own kind of like consensus mechanism with their own kind of like community and stuff like that. But it's just ironic that kind of like that's happened that way. And then you can go down the list and pick out any other projects. I think the Terra ecosystem is actually quite interesting, from like I guess it's, for me, the Terra ecosystem is more fintech than it is DeFi. But the funny thing is that I think the Terra ecosystem is basically the perfect candidate to be a roll-up or a Validium or Volition on Ethereum. I don't think it needs to be its own layer one chain. Like, it already is like way less decentralized than Ethereum, and I'm pretty sure they're going to run into scalability bottlenecks as well. So in my mind, they're probably the top candidate in terms of these chains that actually have traction, that I would say would seriously consider becoming a roll-up or a Volition or a Validium. And as I've said before, they can still keep their native token. They can keep the Luna token, and all they're doing with it, like their UST stablecoin, can still exist. Everything can stay the same. The thing that changes is that even the nodes can stay the same. Like, there can still be nodes on there. Instead of kind of coming to consensus, they're just kind of, I guess, being like a sequencer, for example, processing these transactions, being like an execution node, essentially. That can all remain the same. But instead of coming to consensus within yourself, instead of using your own consensus mechanism, you just default to securing yourself on Ethereum. You either store your data on Ethereum, or if that's too expensive, you have data off-chain. Maybe you can even pivot to, as Polynya said here, you can be like a data availability chain for yourself, right? But still kind of like use Ethereum to secure you via proofs and stuff like that. So I would say that I could see something like the Terra ecosystem doing that. I'm not sure which other chains would do that. There are definitely ones out there that won't. For example, I don't think that Solana will do that. I don't think Polkadot will do it. I don't think Avalanche will do it. I don't think Cosmos will do it. I mean, some of them kind of can't do it, given the kind of, I guess, like architecture of their networks. It just becomes very, very hard and not worth it for them. But yeah, I'm just scrolling down the list here. I really don't see any other chains that could do this. And the funny thing is about these L1s, really, just scrolling down the list, there's only a few of them that actually like that actually have any traction after all kind of like the marketing that's been going on with them, all the rewards being paid out. And I think in not even 5 years. Like I've given my 5-year thesis before, but I think in even like 1 to 2 years, a lot of these things are just going to be completely forgotten about, because the layer 2 ecosystem, especially in the zero knowledge space with rollups and validiums and volitions, they're just so much better than any of this kind of, I guess, any of these L1s. Like, I mean, I'm not going to go on about it again. You guys know my opinion here, and I'm not just bashing L1s because they're not Ethereum. I'm not trying to be an ETH maxi, but like, I bet on the tech. Like, I'm a tech maximalist. If the better tech exists, then the better tech's going to win. And I think that the layer 2s are the best tech. I mean, it's the best tech in this ecosystem. And I think that the modular blockchain kind of like thesis is the best one going forward. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But as I said, like, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. I think Terra will be one of the ones that actually seriously considers becoming a Validium, Volition, or rollup itself. Whereas I don't really think any of the other ecosystems will. Maybe some of the other EVM sidechains might. Maybe, I mean, in saying that, I expect things like the POS chain, the Polygon POS chain, to transition, or at least to kind of, I guess, like, have people migrate from that to Polygon Hermes with their ZK EVM and stuff like that. But more generally, I just think most of these L1s are doomed to fail. I actually think all of them are doomed to fail except Ethereum in the long term. But a lot of them can just keep themselves afloat if they manage to, I guess, like, attract enough developers and enough kind of like community members, but also have like enough of a vibrant ecosystem where people can make money on there. That's the most important thing for a lot of these L1s, is that they can pay out money to people via rewards, or there's a lot of activity happening, so there's a lot of speculative stuff happening on there, and people can earn money. I think that is a staying power for these things, but it's going to be interesting to see how long that kind of like staying power lasts, because it's not going to last forever, but we're just going to have to see how it plays out there. But yeah, so go read this blog post. It's very interesting. And then another post that I came across on Reddit that was actually shared by Polynya as well was this one from L2 Intern on Reddit called "New VMs in Rollups Will Solidify Ethereum's Lead." Now, what this kind of, I guess, post goes through is how anything your L1 can do in terms of like not being an EVM, or not having a different smart contracting language, or being able to do something more than what the EVM can give you, the L2s can do better. I've spoken about Starkware before, how the dYdX is not even built on the EVM and not built in Solidity. It's built in Cairo, which is Starkware's native language, and it's built using their StarkNet or StarkOS, whatever they're kind of calling it these days. I think it was StarkOS. Now they're just referring to it as kind of like a StarkNet. And I think StarkX is like the tech, and StarkNet's kind of like their generalization for all the solutions there. But you don't just stop there. I mean, Arbitrum has their own virtual kind of machine called the AVM. Yes, it's very similar to the EVM, but it's still kind of their own thing. ZK Sync and Polygon Hermes and Scroll as well are doing their ZK EVM stuff, which I'm pretty sure like everyone's going to default to eventually. And then, I mean, as I mentioned, like StarkNet's Cairo virtual machine. But basically what this post says is that like you're not limited to the EVM at layer 2 at all. Just because you want to be EVM compatible, that's fine, because you want to get some traction. You want to be able to have devs just deploy their stuff there, but you're not limited at all. There's no technical limitation saying to you, well, you can only be an EVM and you can only do stuff in Solidity. You can build your entirely new VM from scratch and do whatever you want, and you can also have a different language too. You don't have to have Solidity. So I think it's really important to recognize that when it comes to the layer 2 ecosystem on Ethereum, that it's not limiting at all. It actually opens up a massive design space for developers. So definitely go give this blog post, I guess, like Reddit post, a read. It was very interesting. And speaking of scaling, ChainLinkGod shared this really great little, I guess, flow chart here that I may have showed on the refuel before. It comes from Loopring. That basically just breaks out the layer 2 ecosystem into a bunch of different kind of, I guess, places. We had state channels like Raiden and Celer, and then we had Plasma, which kind of like, I guess, was the sister to Optimistic Rollups, and then off that we have Optimism and Arbitrum. Then you have ZK Rollups, and they're using different technology underneath, Groth 16, Plonk, and Stark, different cryptographic primitives that are being used, and you can see which apps come off of that, but it's all leading to ZK AVM, which is like the holy grail, right? A ZK rollup being able to be fully generalizable, and you can kind of like run any app you want on there. So that is the holy grail of scaling at the moment. Maybe we discover something better, but like that's what everyone's kind of working to right now. So I just thought this was a great visualization to kind of like see how that all plays out there. So Connext put out a great tweet thread over the weekend explaining the interoperability trilemma and how Connext NXTP protocol fixes this. So I'm not going to read this out, of course, but I'm going to tell you to go read it. There is a link in the YouTube description, of course, but it basically explains how Connext works under the hood, what makes them different to other bridging solutions out there, and why they believe that they are the best one out there. And I mean, like as I've mentioned before, disclosure, I'm an investor in Connext, but I invested in them because, I mean, these guys have been doing this for quite a while now, and they know what's up when it comes to bridging, when it comes to, I guess, like cross-chain stuff, cross-L2 stuff, and they're really building it from, I guess, like from first principles, and they've built it from first principles here, and thought about things in a really, really great way to be as trustless as possible. So definitely go check out this thread here. Speaking of bridges, Celer put out this tweet where they said the cBridge that they've got does not only save time and dollars exiting funds from Optimism over others, but it also saves costs the other way around. So, for example, moving funds from Ethereum or any other chain to Optimism via cBridge is actually cheaper than using the native bridges, which is cool. Like I mentioned this before on the refuel, where I said these bridges are going to be cheaper than using the native quote-unquote official bridge that Optimism or Arbitrum or whatever other L2 has out there. So definitely go check out Celer Network cBridge here if you're looking for a bridge to use to get into Arbitrum or Optimism as cheaply as possible. And I mentioned before I wanted to talk a bit about dYdX. It is now the most liquid product, or liquid exchange product, their dYdX Layer 2 perpetual exchange in crypto. More liquid than Binance, more liquid than FTX. You can see here, they had $37 million worth of depths at 50 bips on their ETH perp, whereas Binance has only $16 million of depth and FTX only $12 million. Now, this is crazy. I mean, this isn't comparing spot to perpetuals. It's comparing perpetuals to perpetuals. Like you can see here, perp and perp, which means dYdX is by far the most liquid perpetual exchange out there. And this is just showing, again, the power of a extremely well-built exchange for starters, and an extremely well-built decentralized exchange that doesn't rely on kind of, I guess, centralization like these other ones do because it's built on Starkware, and also the power of a token, of course. Like they put the token out there, dYdX exploded in growth, and the token went up in value too. But I think that without the exchange being as good as it was, the token wouldn't have counted for much, to be honest. I think you need both. You need a good token model, and you also need a good product. And I kind of answered this in the AMA that I did Saturday, which is uploaded on YouTube. If you want to go check that out, I did it at the very start. The first question I answered was about kind of like token distributions. And one thing I harped on about was the fact that you can't just like use a token to bootstrap an ecosystem or bootstrap your product if your product's bad. If the product is bad, then no amount of token incentive is going to make the product good. So I think that's why dYdX, they had a working product. It's amazing. It works just as advertised. And now they have a token to bootstrap that growth, and that's the proper way to do it. It shouldn't be done the other way around, where you have like a token that comes out first before your product has product market fit, and try to kind of force your way into that. That's just not going to happen in my mind. All right, so Polygon has announced that the Switzerland National Postal Service has chosen their POS chain to launch Swiss crypto stamps. So they'll bridge the gap between physical stamps and the digital cryptocurrency industry by introducing tradable digital stamps as NFTs on the Polygon POS chain. I think this is pretty cool, like, to be honest. I mean, the more of these kind of old world institutions getting involved with crypto, the better. And I've mentioned how I think all of them are going to get involved at some point. But I think this makes perfect sense to be on the POS chain. You don't need Ethereum security for, crypto stamps, right? Like, so just putting it on the kind of like less secure and less decentralized POS chain, so I guess sidechain, commit chain, is like totally the right use case here. And I think this is, again, what we're going to be seeing with the Validiums and the Volitions that choose kind of like off-chain data option, where you have kind of like this less secure thing going on, but it makes sense for the use case. So I definitely think that's going to play out like that. But yeah, still cool to see this from Polygon here. I'm coming up on time, so I'm going to run through the rest of these quite quickly. Another kind of bridging protocol I came across over the weekend is MovrNetwork. So they call themselves a cross-layer communication protocol for the multi-L2 future. And one of their kind of like founders put out an interesting screenshot where they said, where they kind of like gave an alpha leak here of how Mover is going to work. So you can see that Mover basically gives you available routes to go down between different chains. You can see route number 1 goes from, you can go from kind of like Aave on Polygon to USDC on Ethereum, and it tells you what kind of like the fees are, and how long it's going to take. And then you can see like the second route and the third route, and each one has different fees going from, I guess, like Polygon to Ethereum, and kind of like using different bridges and stuff like that, and how much in fees it's going to cost you. So you can see here that by using the native, I guess, Polygon bridge at the top, it's going to cost you basically nothing in fees, and it's only going to take 30 minutes. But then, you can get a faster kind of withdrawal if you go from through the AnySwap router or through Hop, and it's going to take you 10 or 5 minutes, but the fees are going to be a bit higher there. So I think it's really cool that you can kind of like see or like compare it here on the fee side, because I think that's what's going to dictate what bridges people use, as well as speed, of course. But if you have to pay $50 in fees to get your funds in 5 minutes, and it's free to get it in 30 minutes, well, you kind of do like a benefit analysis there. Like most people will not need their funds, quicker than 30 minutes, to be honest. Like, unless they're trying to ape into something, well, then they'll probably just pay the fee to get it quicker. But I think, a 30-minute wait for to bridge over from Polygon to Ethereum is probably fine for most people. All right, so Will from Element Finance put out a great tweet over the weekend where he said, here's how to get 8 to 9% APY on ETH. Get STETH, which is Lido staked ETH, deposit it on for Curve STETH, and gain 3% APY on trading fees. Then go and lock in a 5.75 fixed rate on Element Finance for Curve STETH, compounding the 3% APY in step 2, and enjoy a reward of around 8.75% on your ETH, higher if the 3% maintains. This is pretty cool because you're both staking ETH and earning kind of like the APY from Curve, while also locking in a fixed rate on Element Finance, which I've just discussed before as kind of like this fixed and variable yield market. This is obviously more risky than just like straight staking your ETH, but you're getting extra APY because of that. Like if you just straight stake your ETH right now, I think it's like 5.5% or something like that APR a year, and it's non-compounding. This is compounding. Like that's the difference between APR and APY, by the way. APY is compounding, kind of like I guess interest or kind of like yield, whereas APR is non-compounding. So with staking, it's non-compounding because your rewards to put them into to restake them, you have to manually withdraw and do that, but you can't do that right now because there's no kind of like way back. Like you can't withdraw from the beacon chain right now. So that's why with this, you basically get the, staked Ether and then kind of like compound it through Curve and Element Finance. But you're taking on way more smart contract risk here and way more kind of like, it's like risk in general. You're taking on the risk of Lido, of Curve, of Element Finance. So just, keep that in mind. Maybe the extra risk is worth it for you for kind of like liquid, a more liquid kind of yield on your ETH, and 3% more yield than what staking is going to give you right now, like vanilla staking. So yeah, I figured I'd just point that out for you guys as a bit of an alpha leak there in case you missed it. I saw this new project pop up over the weekend called Connext, which is a new service that makes it easy to see what's happening on Web3, and it's in beta right now. So if you go to their website, you can actually kind of like connect your wallet to it, but you can also kind of, I guess, scroll through their feed and see what people are, I guess, buying within the Web3 space, what NFTs they're buying, what they're doing in the NFT space, if kind of like what social kind of clubs they're getting involved in, like Friends with Benefits and stuff like that. It's a pretty cool tool. I suggest going and checking it out. I'm not going to open it here because I run out of time, but definitely a cool tool, I think, for the Web3 space. And I guess, like, speaking of DAOs, there was this project that I don't know if they exited stealth, but it's the first time I'd come across it, called Utopia Labs, and they're launching this product called Utopia. I don't know if it's live just yet. It might be live, but basically what Utopia plans to be is an all-in-one solution for DAOs. So they describe themselves as the modern system for managing contributor payments, expenses, and more for your DAO, built right on top of Gnosis. So they're leveraging the Gnosis safe, I believe, to do this. But you can kind of like see, I guess, like a use case here of they're basically trying to build the modern HR system for automating everything for their DAO, for your DAO. I think there's a few other apps that have done this in the past, but I think with Utopia, they're probably trying to do it in a decentralized way. But you can see in this interface here, they've got like the DAO that you're managing. You can see like the salaries of different people. You can see the the outbound impending payments and what payments are due and stuff like that. The members, all the usual kind of like HR and payment things you're kind of like you're used to seeing and stuff like that. So yeah, really cool to see. I guess like another project tackling this. I think they also raised a round, or at least they announced their investors here. So they have a bunch of investors. Actually, quite a few here. I'm not going to name them all, but yeah, you can see them all on the screen here. But if you want to learn more about this project, I'll link this in the YouTube description, of course, for you to go check out. All right, and finally, David Mihal has said that he's updated his OpenOrgsInfo website, which for those who don't know is a website that tracks kind of like DAO treasuries, and there's a healthy amount of updates here. So basically, he kind of like splits out the DAO's treasury into what's liquid versus what's vesting. With Uniswap, most of their treasury is still vesting over time. So you can see here like $10 or $11 billion of it is vesting. Sorry, $6.5 billion of it is vesting, and then $4.4 billion is unvested at this point in time, for a total of about $11 billion. And then you can see here that he's also broken down what's in these DAOs, like what assets there are in these DAOs. So you can see here, Olympus DAO has their SLP tokens, so their liquidity provider tokens, as their biggest holding. They have DAI, they have Uni, Frax, and then a bunch of other tokens after that. Gitcoin has GTC and a bunch of Akita tokens, the dog tokens that they've got there, and some ETH as well. And yeah, I mean, you can just keep going down the list here. Yam has DPI, USDC, Sushi, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, this is a great website for tracking all things DAO. So definitely go check this out if you haven't already. But on that note, I'm going to end it there for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.